Hi, Richard.
Hi, Fran. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. And today, following with our themes of topics, we have one very interesting, which is workforce challenges in a digital native world. Because um, across industries, leaders are facing a kind of a talent landscapes unlike anything before, because there's a new generation of digital first employees, something that we
Mm,
spoke across the several times. Uh, Also, after the pandemic, a shift into hybrid work and rapid skilled obsolescence, yeah, like a lack of,
obsolescence. Yeah.
yeah. Um, and also it's a raising expectations around the culture, the purpose, and the transparency. So for leadership, like particularly C-suite or board of directors, this isn't just about an HR issue. It's a question of competitiveness, compliance, and execution. So I guess in this discussion, we'll explore the biggest challenges and what executives can do now to build resilience and engage the workflow forces in this digital age.
Mhm.
Very fascinating topic because it's quite hot in many circles today if you go into LinkedIn or certain forums. So let's start with the beginning, which is a kind of a context. What do we mean by a digital native workforce?
Okay. Digitally native workforce is basically employees who grew up with digital tools, like
Right.
this phone here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, they expect work systems nowadays to be as intuitive as consumer apps.
Hmm.
They don't want their ERP to be more complex than Facebook,
Yeah.
if they're even using Facebook.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Or if they know what it is,
I've,
Facebook.
I've, I've basically, I'm of the understanding lately that Facebook is outdated, right?
Right.
Um, but okay, let's just say LinkedIn,
Yeah.
right, as a business
Yeah.
platform versus an enterprise app like an ERP system.
Right.
There's not a lot of tolerance for the one being overly complex or scary or the interface being clunky, that kind of stuff. And that digitally native workforce is a lot less tolerant of clunky processes or legacy software, right?
Right. Right.
And that basically changes the baseline expectation. Work has to be designed as a user experience,
Yeah.
not just as a means to an end, a job. Yeah. And
Right.
that's what we mean by a digitally native workforce.
Right.
They grew up with these tools. They're tied to them for most of the day. And if you want to get real productivity out of them, that's where the workplace needs to exist.
Right. And now lately, I've been following certain people that are looking into this closely, and is before used to be only an HR issue, and now it seems
Mm,
to be that is more a strategic concern for the C-suite and board of directors.
yeah.
So,
Well,
it's not just HR anymore.
workforce challenges, engaging that workforce and keeping them engaged
Right.
in productivity. It directly impacts execution
Yeah.
and resultingly competitiveness.
Right.
If your systems slow people down,
Yeah.
there's very little tolerance for that, especially. Or if engagement is low, you lose productivity
Right.
and risk compliance. You're basically risking numerous compliance failures
Yeah.
and process failures and performance failures, right? So
Yeah.
for CEOs and CFOs and COOs, that kind of thing, workforce capability is inseparable from financial outcomes. It's
Right.
inseparable from risk management, and it's also inseparable from customer satisfaction.
Right, right. So, how do the generational shifts affect the workforce expectations then? Because actually, you have like baby boomers that have an idea what is a workforce and how they operate, and then we have a generation shift.
Yeah. Younger employees value flexibility and
Right,
purpose and speed of execution, right? There's
right,
very little tolerance of dragging out and testing their attention span, right?
right.
They want visibility into why they are doing things.
Yeah.
Now, fellas our age, we just do what we were told back in the day.
Yeah.
And it wasn't an expectation that we could demand why, right? But there's a little bit more of that in today's workforce, right? So, they want visibility into the why, at least visibility. And that's what we were talking about previously is transparency from the top floor to the shop floor.
Right.
They don't want to be just told what to do, right? And there's some Gallup research that shows that employees who are more engaged when they see how their roles connect to the company's mission,
Right.
right? They're just simply more engaged. They're happier,
Yeah.
and they will take correction a lot easier.
Yeah.
They'll also sometimes bless you with awesome suggestions when they've figured out a way to achieve that mission
Right.
that hasn't been factored into the workflows, that kind of stuff. That means leaders really have no choice but to close the gap between strategy and daily work.
Right. And just let's step back in the original, no original, a few questions that we had before. So what are the challenges that are arising from that hybrid and distributed workforce models? Because actually we have now, before you used to go to the office or the factory or the plant, and that was no other way around. But now we have this kind of flexibility that also you mentioned. What are the biggest challenges that we are?
The biggest challenge there is balancing freedom,
Right.
which people enjoy the freedom of that model,
Yeah.
but you have to balance that with accountability,
Right.
right? Remote work requires systems of trust and visibility, clear goals, transparent progress tracking, and governance embedded into workflows, right? Without this, you risk either being in a situation of having to micromanage people or they become disengaged.
Right.
Leaders have to learn to manage outcomes, not just man hours.
Right. Right. I think that's the biggest change
Mhm.
lately, the outcomes rather than hours in the office.
Well, there's that trust element, right? And
Yeah.
and no employee, like I said, and we've mentioned this a number of times, nobody's waking up in the morning with any desire whatsoever to be a failure and to mess
Right.
up their job.
Yeah.
Nobody wakes up that way, right? And rather than the big brother is watching you concept of a
Yeah.
system is basically tracking you and all that other kind of stuff, it's actually the other way around. Employees feel protected
Yeah.
when their work productivity is connected to mission and is tracked and traced, and the baselines and the expectations are reasonable.
Right.
You know, it
Right.
it it that way performance is, which causes a lot of conflict. Okay,
Yeah.
now it starts to be something that's provable
Yeah.
as opposed to being, subjective. It becomes objective as a
Right.
as a measure, right?
So this could be also seen as a rapid skill obsolescence, and how
Yeah.
that is shaping the workforce strategy then.
Well, a lot of people believe that half of today's skills may be outdated within 3 to 5 years,
Right. Right.
right? The introduction of AI to the workplace, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I can assure you it's going to displace far fewer people than what most people think, right?
Yeah.
And it's not about displacing. What it will do is add productivity. It will
Right.
add it will add quality. It'll add productivity. Yes, of course, it's going to displace some, you know, uh, drudgery, in terms of generating things,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, right? Um, but on the whole, it makes talent acceleration, which is like reskilling and upskilling,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
people that
Yeah.
you already have.
Yeah.
That needs to become a core operating model, not obsolescence, not
Yeah.
getting rid of headcount, but making them more skilled and more effective, right?
Yeah.
Companies that rely only on recruitment are going to fall behind,
Right.
right? C-level leaders need to embed learning as part of daily operations, not as a side program, right? It
Yeah.
needs to be a part of the way they operate and a part of the culture so that the workforce, at least in their environment,
Right.
is keeping up to date,
Right.
right?
So
And
that,
has modern skills and doesn't get caught. You got to avoid the bleeding edge, but you want to keep them on the leading edge
right.
and keep them productive. That will give a sense of security to those employees. That will improve morale. You know, you have to balance how much time and investment you're going to put into those people. But
Yeah.
I've always found that people who are being invested in are far more effective and engaged. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is sounds like a more is a more transparency between the top floor and the shop floor. So
Yeah.
which is, seems to be more critical now than before, where you have the what people call the ivory tower. Oh, the ivory people in the ivory tower, this and the other. Now it seems actually more a transparency all across the
Yeah.
organization.
Well, think about it this way. It's very similar to when open office concepts started to be
Right,
introduced,
right.
right? Once upon a time, everybody had their little door
Yeah.
and their little space, right? And then that shifted more to everybody's in an open office
Mm,
space, but there's meeting rooms if you need to go to them. There's places for privacy.
right,
Maybe an executive or two is behind a glass wall
right,
because of
right.
them having sensitive phone calls and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah,
Um, but when we're talking about the technology environment, the
right,
systems, transparency equals engagement and trust,
right,
right? Employees want to see how their work contributes to strategy, how
right.
it connects to the mission, even the smallest things and tasks that they need to perform.
Yeah,
There's been studies by Gallup, by MIT Sloan, that show that when people see that connection to mission and to strategy,
right.
engagement rises, turnover drops, and turnover is expensive
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
for any
It's
company,
very,
right?
yeah,
And culture strengthens.
yeah,
Yeah. Conversely, if the strategy layer is invisible, today's workforce disengages
yeah.
and judges, right?
Right,
If they don't know what your strategy is, they'll assume what they think it is based on whatever goals you've set for them.
yeah,
And that can, who knows if they're going to be correct or not, right? But
right,
digital tools now make it possible to give employees a clear line of sight between their contributions and companies' priorities.
right. And
And to not take advantage of that is the leadership themselves becoming obsolete.
right.
That's a fact.
And so then how then the leader think about culture and well-being, if you may, in this high-tech environment? Because just to avoid being obsolete,
Well, look, I've worked in companies where the culture was built on the slogans that they would put up on the wall, right?
right, right,
But it's actually culture is the lived experience of daily work.
right,
Yeah. Um, in high-tech environments or where you've got operating systems, burnout and quiet quitting are risks if people feel disconnected,
right,
right? Leaders have to create a culture of purpose, inclusion, and recognition that has to be supported by the technology that they choose,
yeah,
right? There needs to be data transparency. There needs to be links to mission on a
yeah,
daily basis, right? And when employees see fairness and clarity, well-being naturally follows. You
right,
can't set targets for, well, we want to cut our costs by 50% and we want to increase our profit by 100%, and then just tell them to connect to that mission.
yeah,
That, you know, how can you connect to that if it's entirely unreasonable,
right, right,
right? And I think it has to be built into the technology that you use.
yeah.
It, Looks like we had a little bit of a delay there that
We
you'll have
have
to
a
cut
little
out there, Fran.
glitch there. Yeah, I'll. But actually, the interesting point I was hearing is actually it's all embedded also in the risk and around compliance. So
Mm.
so if we're going to how trust and ethics come in these high driven data driven workplaces. So because there's a lot of
Mm.
data around, there's a lot of technology. So how we make sure that compliance, trust, and ethics are all considered in as part of the transparency that we're mentioning.
Well, with things like AI and automation, companies
Right.
gather more data on employees than they ever have before.
Yeah.
If that data is misused, it damages trust and
Right.
creates compliance liabilities, quite frankly.
Right.
Leaders have to set clear ethical standards and embed compliance into workflows to
Mm.
protect employees, to protect data, protect any sensitive information.
Yeah.
Not as after the fact, audit and correction checks,
Right.
right? But as part of daily operations, that also needs to be built into the technology. Trust is the foundation of a digitally native workforce.
Right.
Trust. Yeah.
So in terms of pragmatism, so what practical steps can be expected or executives take right now to address these challenges?
Well, it's ideal if you're in a position where you're going to start looking at scaling up the technology in your company, where you
Right.
don't have a lot of legacy systems. But if you're going
Yeah.
to swap from a legacy system to something more modern, or you're looking at a system selection, you want to invest and make sure that you're investing in the digital employee experience,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
Treat the workforce tools like customer tools. If it's not attractive to something like that you would deliver to a customer,
Yeah.
right? In the technology market, it's not going to be attractive to your digitally native workforce.
Right. Right.
Reskilling, we touched on that earlier. Make learning measurable and continuous.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a how do you eat an elephant, right? One
Yeah.
bite at a time, a little bit of training here and there,
Yeah.
and employees will feel valued, invested in, and you'll end up with leading edge workforce, right?
Right.
And you definitely, absolutely have to close the transparency gap,
Right.
right? Use dashboards, governance software integrated with operations,
Right.
execution in the software, not just in the meetings, right?
Right. Right.
Platforms like Trinity that embed transparency into workflows, linking strategy to daily execution are proving critical. It's why we built it,
Yeah.
is to address this
Excellent.
environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we look ahead, so how should
Mm.
leaders reframe workforce strategies for long-term competitiveness? Because at the end, we want to sustain these companies for as long as possible at a profit.
Mm. Yeah. Workforce strategy.
Right.
Um, as opposed to, an HR issue. It should be reframed as a competitive advantage,
Right.
right? If you're doing it right, it will, without a doubt, be a competitive advantage. It
Right.
will show up on your bottom line, right? Instead of thinking in terms of cost centers or headcount, leaders should see the workforce as a more live, dynamic system, skilled,
Right.
engaged, enjoying transparency and digitally empowered. Companies that master this will outperform in resilience, in
Yeah.
compliance, and in innovation.
Right. Right. Fantastic. Well, I think that actually this is a fantastic conversation today because we started saying that what are the workforce challenges in this digital
Mm,
native world. I think the key is what you just mentioned. It's a competitive advantage rather than a problem. It starts with the executive level. It's not just an HR problem. Platforms are fully integrated that provide transparency from the shop floor to the top floor are one of the tools, or if not the tools, to provide these elements to everybody, just to go ahead in the future.
yep.
Yeah, fantastic. I think actually we have a lot to think now. Because at the end, we mentioned several times at the end, and you very clearly show this, or you said that very, very clearly. Nobody wants to get up in the morning to fail. So going to
Nope.
work and be part of the organization with a clear purpose, and contribute to that purpose, and not be judged by that, rather to be it's the other way around. It's just to see, okay, look, we are doing a good job, and platforms like Trinity can provide that things. And this, I'm referring to KPIs, where people take them as a punishment tool, rather than as a tool to say you are safe, you're doing a good job, and this is a way that we can make it better.
Well, I've seen even beyond that. I've seen
Yeah,
environments where there was transparency.
right,
And, you can't expect leadership to think of absolutely every minutiae, right? Things
right,
can
right.
change on the shop floor.
Yeah,
And when those employees are engaged, connected to purpose,
yeah,
and they see what you're trying to achieve, you'd be surprised how often they come up with innovations
right.
that
Yeah,
improve everything. But if they don't actually feel like they have any say, if
yeah,
they're not part of that top floor.
yeah,
You're never going to get that value out of them. There's
yeah.
going to be worker bees who work
It,
and perform their tasks, but you
yeah,
go to the next level and you'd be surprised what suggestions will come your way.
yeah,
Maybe they correct your KPIs. Maybe that's unrealistic. Maybe you should be asking for more. I've
yeah,
actually seen it. I've observed employees saying those goals, that baseline is really, really too low.
yeah,
We can do better than that. You know,
yeah,
that's a great environment to have is for them to suggest increase, our targets.
yeah,
We can do better. That kind of an idea is ideal, but you can't do it without connecting operations to strategy, without connecting the top floor to the shop floor. You can't do
right.
it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, Richard, I think that we can wrap up today. Is absolutely fascinating conversation, and we can spend a whole day with this.
Yeah.
But I guess we're going to rejoin our conversation next week,
Yep.
with another fascinating topic that we are not going to disclose now.
Great.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for your time, Fran. Bye
Thanks.
bye.
Bye bye.